right, welcome to the Epilogue episode. And just as a quick reminder, I think I mentioned it in the last episode, but just in case you forgot, the Epilogue episode, there's not going to be any gameplay. Not on the campaign, there's not going to be any battles or anything. This is an episode where I basically just talk about the end of the campaign, and normally I also go through some saves, talk about army composition, economic development, things that I don't really cover very much during the actual campaign itself for those who might be curious. So if none of that interests you, then thank you very much for having watched the campaign, and I hope to see you in any future campaigns. And of course, I also have a bunch of existing campaigns you can go and watch as well. If any of what I just said interested anyone else, then watch on. So now at this point, normally I would do a map reveal, but for the life of me, I could not figure out how to actually do that. Obviously, there's no console in Empire Total War in the same way there is in Rome 1 and Medieval 2, and I knew that going in, but I figured that there would still be a way to do it either through mods or through modifying, different files. Some way, there would be some way to do it. And as I was researching it, there were definitely suggestions, quite a lot of different suggestions for like downloading tools and modifying save files and all sorts of different things. And to be honest, they all either didn't work or I broke my saves. Like, I never actually managed to get it to remove the fog of war. And that's usually a big part of these epilogue episodes. This is actually probably going to be one of the shortest epilogue episodes I ever have done, simply because we're not going to be able to do map reveals like we normally do. I still will go through the old saves so that we can look at least our own progress as the campaign progressed. But this is a really short campaign, so there's only these 5 saves here. So honestly, that part's not going to take very long either. So very, very short epilogue episode. But I guess regardless, let's just go ahead and begin. And we'll just go right back to the very first save. All right, so here we are on the very first save of the campaign. Now, this would have been at the end of that play session, so this isn't how we started the campaign. We only started the campaign with one settlement, and that was Boston. I remember being quite nervous about basically being surrounded by British forces on all sides, because I was worried that with Washington taking his forces and leaving... Oh wait, where is Washington now? Oh, of course, he would be over here in Philadelphia. With Washington taking his forces and leaving to attack, like, first Maine, and then I think he went to Albany and then to Philadelphia, I was worried that, like, at any point, British forces could just come around and take Boston or, destroy our settlements that we just recently took. I was able to train up forces to defend these places, and in fact, I think the garrison at Maine in particular has to fight quite a few battles. I don't think you guys really saw very many of them, but the British kept sending like little 2, 3, or even just 1 unit armies. Well, I don't want to call them armies, detachments to just like run through our territory or just raid like different bits. Like this port was in a state of perpetually being raided until we actually came over here and took Acadia. But it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Basically, again, we were able to train up forces to hold back the British at different points and still allow Washington to continue on and take further settlements. At this point, I think we are still only at war with the British. I guess I can actually look at that. Well, and technically the pirates. But yeah, Spain, look at it. Spain is so friendly, so happy. I still don't know the exact minute or exactly what happened that caused them to turn against us. And again, it could just be the AI being the AI, like, oh, I don't have anyone to fight, so let's see, where's the player? Ah, he's over there. Let's go to war. That sort of thing. And of course, indifferent with all of the minor nations here. But yeah, it looks like Washington basically just took Philadelphia. I mean, he hasn't even recovered his casualties yet, so we're still like 2 turns away from moving out. I think what we did is we headed back to Albany and then went to Cayuga and then pushed into Canada. And then I think another force... Oh, I think Dayton. I think we actually create the second army here for General Dayton, have him go and take Acadia, and that's how his army begins, and then he starts heading over to Quebec. Though obviously we haven't reached that point yet here. In fact, let's just go ahead and skip ahead to the next save. Alright, so here we are at the next save, and I can see we've started building up the shipyard here at Plymouth to be a military port. It was a trading port at first, so the inglorious beginning of the American Navy can be started here, though they don't do much in the campaign. And again, very inglorious end to the American Navy. But at this point in the campaign, we've got General... Whoops, click on him. There we go. General Dayton's army here, and I think it's basically as I had described. We cobbled together some forces from, the garrisons here at Maine and at Boston. Probably trained up a couple of extra units just for him. I think we would have done that with the cannons and probably those cavalry units as well. And he would have taken Acadia and is now at Quebec, which he does end up taking. Oh, this is also, he would have fought a battle here. I think this was probably one of the larger battles of the campaign against the British because they sallied out. Well, I don't want to say sallied out. They marched out and met him here before having to retreat back in defeat. Because, if you say sallied out, it implies that Dayton was like already over here at Quebec and they were sallying out to meet him rather than marching across, the river here to go and attack him. So, anyway, let's see. It looks like Washington has taken Montreal at this point. Okay, yes. So this is the point at which basically he's done in this part of Canada, and so he's going to head over west to take Huron territory and Rupert's Land over there. So we were only intending to take Huron territory. Rupert's Land, I think it's the Inuit. Yeah, it says right there. They held that settlement, and I wasn't going to go to war with them, but they attacked me. Viciously and unprovoked. Actually, to be honest, I'm not sure if attacking me is the right word. More like they declared war and then didn't do anything. I mean, their troops were kind of over here, at my borders, so maybe they would have started raiding across the border, or maybe even tried to take Huron territory. I mean, they had a big enough army they could have tried. But anyway, regardless, that's in the future. The British are mostly in retreat, though they do still have significant, or fairly significant force here. Certainly it's close to Washington's own, because at this point, Washington doesn't have his full army, and neither does General Dayton. They're definitely forces that we just kind of cobbled together to start attacking, rather than waiting for the enemy to overwhelm us. I think it's after Quebec, and probably after Washington returns from Rupert's Land that they actually get like their full-sized armies. In fact, Dayton, I think, goes on to really attack more here in the south before meeting his untimely demise. I think it was at Savannah, actually. All right, but anyway, I don't think there's very much more to discuss here. Again, not much can happen when there's only like 5 saves in a row. But in any case, let's go ahead and skip to the next save then. All right, so here we are on the 3rd save. The American Navy is actually about halfway created, because I think we had 6 or maybe 7 ships by the end of it. by its untimely demise, its untimely end. Let's see. Okay, Spain is very friendly even at this point. I think the only thing... Okay, they don't like different government types and they don't like territorial expansion. And those are pretty significant, but they're still paled by like historical friendships, trade agreements, and I guess other things. Oh, there's religious differences too, but that seems to be pretty small. Now, we have General Dayton, who has started his march south, and it looks like he's going to attack Annapolis here. He does have his full army at this point, and he's also getting his siege train in order, which I think we'll talk more about that later, but basically grenadiers and howitzers would replace the skirmishers, or the rangers, I should say, and the foot artillery when it came to a siege that had walls. But I don't think we have them at this point. The grenadiers are over here. I think, yeah, some of them are here, but we also don't have any of the howitzers yet. In fact, I imagine... Is that because we can't train them yet? Yes, it's because we actually need to finish building the Great Arsenal before we can even start training those units. And I imagine... Yes, the Great Arsenal is basically 1 turn away from being built in both of those places. So that's why we don't have any howitzers yet. And I'm never willing to really wait too long for like new units. So that's why I think Dayton is not really waiting for his siege units to get created and is just kind of moving on right away. Let's see. I want to say, yes, General Washington has taken Huron territory and Rupert's Land. Very recently, I presume, because we haven't actually built up the... Well, he hasn't recovered his casualties yet at all. And we haven't built up the magistrate building yet.
Sir.
Looks like his skirmishers are coming to join him, though. You know, not too much more has actually happened, I feel, between this save and the last save. We've got 2 settlements. No new settlements down here. General Dayton is about to get one, but he's not quite there yet. I feel like there must have been a few turns here where, or actually a fair number of turns here, where there wasn't much fighting to be done. But yeah, okay, that looks like that is it, so I guess we'll move on to the 4th save. All right, so here we are on the 4th, and it's the second to the last save. The American Navy is complete, and it looks like we do have 7 ships. I say complete in the sense that this is all the ships we managed to build before the end. Spain has already declared war at this point, so again, I'm not really sure when exactly it tipped against us. But yeah, war. In fact, this is the very turn, I think, where the Navy would have sallied out against the Spanish and would have been crushed, absolutely crushed by their galleons. Well, their galleons, and I think, what do they got here? Oh, I guess it really was the galleons. I thought they had like a 3rd rate or a nicer ship there too that wasn't one of the galleons. But no, I guess it is the galleons. The galleons were the ones who crushed us. Right, now, there isn't too much to talk about up here. Washington is obviously left by now, and he's involved in his staring contest with the Iroquois, though, again, I think this is the turn where we would start marching him back to Boston, because the Spanish are going to take it the very next turn. Basically, this turn, the Navy attacks and is destroyed, and in the next turn, the Spanish come and raid the port and then take Boston. Meanwhile, General Dayton has taken Annapolis, Williamsburg, and is heading down towards Charleston. I think he's...
Ready for
Oh, no, wait, where is he? Okay, he's over here. At this point, he does have his siege units, the howitzers and the grenadiers, which we'll talk about them in a bit, I think, once we get to talking about army composition, because we've left behind the quote-unquote non-siege units back here, which are the foot artillery and the skirmishers. All right, and then I think we should have, yes, General Hogarth's army exists at this point, and again, just slightly upgraded units for him. I didn't give him any, again, quote-unquote, siege units, because I wasn't expecting there to be any walls in this direction, and indeed, it doesn't look like there are. So, he basically just had upgraded units of cavalry, infantry, and skirmishers, or I guess in this case, the long riflemen are irregulars. And yes, this whole time I didn't realize that fire by rank was already researchable. I really should have kind of hurried that along the moment it was available, just because it would make our line infantry so much more effective. Yeah, honestly, there isn't really anything to talk about up in these areas up here, because once we took those settlements, it was kind of over at that point. We never got counterattacked by anyone. I mean, I guess we couldn't in the case of the Inuit. The Plains Nation could have attacked us from, say, over here. They have actually quite a large amount of territory. Like, not a lot of settlements, but like all this territory... Oh, wait, actually, I guess most of this territory is just wilderness. So it's not really their territory, per se. Well, my point is that, like, if they had significant enough forces here, they could have marched them out along the coast here, presumably, and attacked Rupert's Land. I mean, Rupert's Land was never heavily defended at any point, and even these militia, I end up disbanding them at some point just because we didn't really need them. As I said, Washington is going to head back to Boston to fight his last battle and the last battle of the campaign. I did maintain at all times at least a small garrison of Minutemen here, just because I kept expecting the Iroquois to attack us as well, but that never ended up happening. I think we also started to build up the walls. Or I think I did build up at least the first layer of walls, or first level of walls, because I figured that would be necessary. Though I think later on I do start building up the second layer as well. Alright, and we already talked about what was happening down south here. Oh, that's right, I guess I didn't say when General Dayton was marching south here, he actually took Williamsburg, not from the British, but from the Plains Nation, because this is when they declared war on us. And once again, it was more of it wasn't like an attack, it was they declared war and then did not attack us, which is kind of odd. I think it's basically, that might be just because of the way war declarations kind of work in this game, as opposed to Rome 1 and Medieval 2. Because, I mean, in Rome 1 and Medieval 2, you could walk right through anyone's territory that you wanted to. And that might cause, like, diplomatic incidents to occur where, like, their opinion will drop of you, and, I mean, that could even lead to war, but it doesn't automatically cause a war. You could still walk through their territory, and maybe things would be fine depending on, like, your relationship and stuff with them. Whereas I think in this game, you can't walk across, like, their territory unless you have military access, or if they're an enemy nation, you can just obviously walk into their territory as well. And so maybe that's why the AI is more of a declare war first and then attack maybe later sort of strategy. Because obviously in my case, if I had declared war on anyone, I would declare war and then immediately attack. There wouldn't be like a turn or two like delay. Then again, I didn't have to declare war at any point in this campaign, so I never even got to make that choice. All right, but anyway, I think it's time. Let's go to the last save. All right, and so here we are on the last save. And just as a quick reminder, the reason Washington is still besieging Boston here rather than having successfully taken it is because once that battle was over and we like clicked through a message or two, the campaign just ends right there, and there's no like opportunity, I guess, to save and like look over the map after that's done. So this is the best we're going to get here. Basically just before Washington takes Boston. Again, nothing really to discuss up here. Those militia have been disbanded from Rupert's Land, as I said. We still have... Okay, we did start building up the second level of walls here at Cayuga, or Cayuga, whatever it is. And then as we head south here, this must be... Oh yeah, this is literally right before the Battle of Boston. So we've already taken Tellico at this point. General Hogarth certainly had a interesting first major battle. I think he did fight a couple of smaller battles where he defeated like just small, like 1 or 2 unit detachments of Plains Nation troops. But no, it was here at Tellico where things went very interesting for him, because this was the battle, you may remember, where the British reinforced from behind and their units were able to really sneak up on us because I think they're able to pretty easily hide. And also the replay was unwatchable because it was just so different from the way the actual battle went. So that was a very interesting battle, and General Hogarth certainly got rather bloodied up in his first major engagement with the enemy. Then we have down here, General Dayton's army was taken over by General Walton, though I don't think he fought any battles, because it was the Battle of Savannah where Dayton was killed. And that was another interesting battle. The replay did work fine, but we had lots of FPS drops simply because of the AI and its inability to properly command its troops when in a fort. But the enemy was able to do quite a number on our cavalry, I think. And again, they were also able to kill General Dayton, as I said. Lots of bloody fighting, too, with the Grenadiers and the Howitzers. I think they're up here now. I had to have the Minutemen, get on the walls from behind and then get into the settlement, or the fort, I should say, from behind and fire into the backs of them before we were able to finally break them. Very interesting battle. Oh, that was the only crash of the campaign, too, now that I think about it. It was during the replay, or at the very end of the replay, I should say. Like, the battle was basically over, so that was the ideal time for a replay to crash. And honestly, during a replay is also the optimal time to crash, rather than, say, in the actual battle itself, because, I mean, you could always just rewatch a replay, and while you could always just refight a battle as well, that's a bit more of a pain, I think, than just rewatching the replay. So anyway, General Walton in command now, and he never fights a single battle because it just never comes up, because, of course, General Washington takes back Boston at this point, and the campaign is over. All right, well, that was a pretty quick go-through of the saves, but let's go ahead and move on then to army composition. In the beginning of the campaign, we saw how basically General Washington and General Dayton's armies were essentially just whatever units were immediately available to hand, and it was only later on that we kind of standardized a bit. Basically, the lower tier army is... Actually, that's not true. All of our armies are 4 cavalry, 4 artillery, 7, let's call them line infantry, as in infantry that would hold the line against the enemy rather than because they were literally line infantry, along with 4 skirmisher or irregular units. And honestly, there was only one army that actually had a higher tier or quality of troops than this, and that was, as I think we already mentioned, General Hogarth's army. So he had regiment of horse instead of the provincial cavalry, line infantry instead of the Minutemen, and the long riflemen in place of the Rangers. But the concept, the idea behind his army is the same. It's just that he had some higher quality troops in many cases. Now, I did talk about having a sort of siege train for General Dayton, now General Walton's army, though they're actually up here at the moment. I guess the idea behind this was... I mean, the foot artillery obviously can absolutely be used in a siege to, shoot down the walls. But what I like about the howitzers is that they can also arc their shots. So once they've taken out the walls, they can go ahead and start shelling the actual troops in the settlement, or in the fort. Because obviously, once you destroy, a bit of wall, it is just a bit of wall. So usually the enemy still has a lot of cover. I remembered in my one and only other Empire Total War campaign, where I played as Great Britain, and it's not on the channel, so don't go looking for it. It was before I actually did YouTube. But basically, I did use the howitzers to pretty good effect, just shelling the enemy before charging in, because you could use explosive shells or quicklime shot, whatever you've got available, to really soften up the enemy before going in. Now, I did also use grenadiers in place of the skirmishers, or in this case, the Rangers. And the reason for that is simply because they're kind of like line infantry, except I think they have a better melee attack, and maybe a better defense, too. In fact, here, let's compare. Got melee attack of 10 and a defense of 16. So, where's the line infantry? Yeah, so they've got a melee attack of 6 and a defense of 13. So better defense and considerably better attack. And in those sorts of fort battles, that matters, because when you pour into the breach, it's kind of hard to just sit there and fire, exchange shots with the enemy. There is going to be a lot of, melee fighting. And so I do like to have the grenadiers kind of go in there first and, I guess take the brunt of the fighting while the line infantry, or in this case, the Minutemen, kind of follow up behind them to give them support, but they're really there just to help the grenadiers rather than to fight the battle themselves. And that's why I like replacing the skirmishers and the foot artillery, just because I feel like these units are better in a siege. And I've done this sort of thing, too, in past campaigns, like for other Total War games. I remember in the Julii campaign, I would have, backup forces that would include, artillery that I could use in a siege. but then I would trade them out for like my cavalry when they were running around fighting field battles, because the cavalry was more useful in a field battle and not so much in a siege, but the artillery was extremely useful in a siege and somewhat useful in the field, but not as much. It kind of depends on the campaign. If this campaign had gone on for much longer, the backup forces would probably have been more substantial, like including some militia units. Not so that they can fight battles on their own, but just so that we could leave units behind in a settlement and have the main force immediately move on. Because if you actually click on Charleston right now, they actually, despite being exempt, are still upset. And so I am quickly training up some units here to, make them happier. But at the same time, it might be easier to just have some troops available as well who can just be left behind. Right now, for settlement development, I guess it's really quite straightforward. In past Total War games, basically Rome 1 and Medieval 2, I would have like a recruiting, what should we call it? A recruiting zone, a recruiting region, if you will, where there would be 2 or 3 settlements that would be really heavily militarily built up, and all of my armies would be created there, basically. Maybe a couple of units could be trained elsewhere and then retrained for better armor or weapon quality at one of the main settlements. But basically, I would have a main military recruitment region, and then everywhere else would focus on the economy. Now, that's not really applicable, I want to say, very much to Empire Total War, because when it comes to the major cities like Philadelphia and Quebec and Boston, you can kind of just build military and economic buildings just side by side. Like if I were to destroy this military academy here, I don't think there's like the option for, oh, here, not that one, building browser. So you see, there is no like other option for, oh, now you can build a market in its place or something like that. Now, these smaller settlements, which, are the bulk of them, you can actually decide if you want them to be economic or military focused. But since basically Boston and Philadelphia, and to a lesser degree Quebec, were, fully capable of training up whatever troops I needed, I didn't see much point in ever having one of these, like, governor's barracks anywhere. So if it was already like a military-focused place when I took it, I just knocked the building down and started building it up into these government buildings instead. Basically, I think they just give slightly more. Okay, let's see. They have +3 repression, 9% tax income. Okay, you see they have 3 times the tax income, and they actually have greater repression as well. But what the governor's barracks allow you to do is recruit 2 units at a time instead of 1. And of course, a large number of different types of units, as opposed to the 2 units that the capitals let you build, just these militia and those cavalry. But again, I never felt that I really needed these units to be anywhere else, or to be trained anywhere else than like our main provinces here in Philadelphia and Boston, and again, to a lesser degree in Quebec. Now, with that being said, the AI, and especially Great Britain, I assume, actually has a bit of an advantage in that regard. Because, like I said, the government building only lets you train a couple of units there. But you'll notice, if I go to recruitment here, at Annapolis, there seems to be quite a lot more troops that can be trained here than just those 2 units. And that's because this Parliament Chamber building actually belongs to Great Britain. And it seems to be, well, first off, an even better government building than ours, +4 repression, +12% bonus to region tax income. But it also seems to do double duty as being a like military barracks. It lets you train 2 units at once, lets you train many different kinds of units. So Annapolis, I actually did end up training a few units here. I think the Long Riflemen actually came from here, simply because we had access to that building by taking it away from Great Britain. But I also think that means, that kind of explains why Great Britain has a bit of an advantage when it comes to training units. Simply because they have the better buildings for it. Is this? Yeah, this one is government chambers. Oh, though, now that I look at it, only the highest tier of that building actually lets you train all that many more units. This, let's see, this is the tier 4 building. It's basically the equivalent of our own building, except it does give them, it actually really does give them some better units. Like, I do think the Mounted Tribal Auxiliary and the Native Musket Men, Hessian Line Infantry are definitely better than our two options, because they're just the Provincial Cavalry and the Militia, which they still have the Militia, too, if they want them. All right, so now just the last things to go through are just really quickly some of the rules or quirks that I have for my campaign. And if you watched the prologue, you already know what they are, because I always say what they are in the prologue, but I always remind people what they were in the epilogue, just to kind of explain some of my actions in case it seemed kind of weird during the campaign. So, for example, no auto-resolves. Even against some of these smaller battles that I mentioned, where General Dayton, or even just the garrison at Maine, was like destroying little 1-2 unit detachments of the British. Like, those battles were never auto-resolved. You guys didn't see them because I didn't think it was particularly important or exciting for you guys to see them. But I don't auto-resolve any battles just because I enjoy, most of all, the battle aspects of the Total War games. And even the small battles, I get enjoyment out of them, even if it's a much smaller enjoyment, rather than just auto-resolving them. For major battles, that's still the case as well, though, where maybe I was going to take a settlement and it only had, like 2 or 3 units in it. Easy auto-resolve, easy victory. That's not going to happen because this is, an important, taking the settlements is what brings you victory in a Total War campaign. Like, it's literally the victory objectives. And so I definitely want all of those battles to show up, even if they are a bit small. I mean, if they're small, then we'll just get through them quickly. But I still enjoy them, and I still think it's important to show them in the videos. I also fight battles all the way to the end. Anytime the message popped up that says, "Hey, do you want to continue the battle, or do you want to end the battle now?" After you had defeated the enemy, and they were routing, I always choose continue just automatically. I do consider like running down the enemy to be part of the battle. And I don't just mean in the sense that, oh, well, now you'll have fewer enemies to fight next time. Like, even if I knew for sure that the enemy army would disband after the battle, even if, like, I didn't chase down any more of them, I would still do it just because, for my own enjoyment, and because I do consider it, to be part of the battle, I always continue on and run down the enemy. Now, at times, I think I would let you guys go a little sooner. Like, I didn't necessarily have you guys watch the cavalry run down the enemy to the end, and that was just because sometimes it took a while for them to do it. I didn't think you guys would enjoy watching that very much, but I always did it myself, and I always did watch, like, to the end, basically. Something that I always despise in the Total War games, the center of the settlement magic victories, which, if you've played Rome 1 and Medieval 2, you know how the center of the settlement is this zone where all the enemies will route back to if they've been broken, and then they'll have they'll be unbreakable once they're in the center of the settlement there. And you basically just kind of have to fight them to the death to then win the battle. Now, there are times, though, where the enemy might not have a unit in the center of the settlement, and you're able to kind of like sneak around and get a unit in there and basically run down the timer to just sort of automatically win. I never do that sort of thing. I deliberately avoid that sort of thing. Now, I think it's less prominent in this game, partially because the enemy will route off the battlefield and they won't route back to the center of the fort. In fact, I think if they don't have walls in a settlement, it's just a regular field battle anyways. I do think that timer still exists, though. Like, if you stand in the middle of a fort, in the center of the fort, where the flag is, I still do think you get the countdown timer, where you could, in theory at least, win the battle just by standing there and waiting for the timer to run out. And so that's just something that I never do. So even if, like, in a battle you thought, hey, why didn't he just bring his units to the center of the fort and just sit them there for a while? That's just something I never do. In any of these Total War games. I don't like center of the settlement, or in this case, center of the fort, magic victories. It annoys me to no end. I think battles should be fought to the end against any enemies who are still, capable and ready to fight back. All right, so now quickly, just to talk about the mods that I used. Obviously, they're in the description. You can see them. They were all basically graphical upgrades. And you know what? I think they were great graphical upgrades. The sound mods, the blood and smoke mods. I made a mod that removes the projectile trails, because strangely, I couldn't find one. I mean, maybe I didn't look very hard, and there actually are a bunch of mods that remove the projectile trails, but for some reason, I couldn't find one. So I ended up making one based on some instructions that I found on, I think it was Total War Center. Like there were some instructions that basically told you how to modify the vanilla pack files to get rid of the projectile trails, and instead of modifying the vanilla pack files, I just made my own pack file that includes the updated values, and so that's just where that mod came from. But it was definitely very cinematic. I definitely liked that better than when I played my original Great Britain campaign. Again, not on the channel. It was before I made YouTube. In that campaign, I didn't play with any mods at all, so we still had the guns that had, like, I want to say pop gun sounds. They don't sound very much like guns. And then the projectile trails that made it look like they were shooting lasers at each other. I know some people, or even many people, don't care about that, and it's fine for them, but it really annoys me. So I'm glad that we were able to get rid of that. This is also the first campaign where I actually would, instead of showing you guys the actual battles, I would show you replays of the battles instead. That's something that I actually wanted to do from the very beginning. Like when I first started making YouTube videos, that's something that I wanted to do. But in Rome 1 and Medieval 2, you can't do that. There is no button to save a campaign battle replay. And my efforts to try and like find one, or like a mod, or just a different way of doing it, all came to nothing. So that's just how those campaigns are going to have to go. But I believe from Empire Total War onwards, they all have the ability to save a campaign battle replay. So anytime I play those Total War games, that will be the standard going forward, where we watch replays of the battles instead of the actual battles. Unless, of course, as happened in this campaign, the replays differ drastically from the actual battle that occurred, in which case we'll just have to watch the regular battle. I think that happened, it actually happened 4 times, I want to say, in this campaign, where the replay didn't match the actual battle, but I think in 2 of the cases, it was so small that we would just watch the replay anyways. The 2 big ones would have been, I think, the Battle of Tellico, and I want to say it was either Savannah or Charleston. I think, oh no, it wasn't Savannah or Charleston. It was Boston. It was the very last battle of the campaign, when Washington attacked Boston. Hopefully, the replays do, for the most part, follow the actual battle. I think they do, honestly. And I think there are things you can do to like make sure that it's less likely to happen, where the replay kind of gets out of sync with the actual battle. But at the same time, I think the possibility of the replay not matching the actual battle is always there. So I'll probably always just have to record the battle, the actual battle, and then just in case there's something wrong with the replay, just so that I can still show you the battle properly. I guess just the last thing that I'd like to mention really quick is the crashes, which I've already, I think, gone over. There was only 1 crash in this campaign, and that was it wasn't even during regular gameplay. It was while we were watching the replay of the Battle of Savannah. So, depending on how you want to count the crashes, there have technically been 0 that occurred during actual gameplay. Which, I mean, this is a very short campaign anyway, so there wasn't as much time really for a lot of crashes to occur anyways. Now, I think I mentioned during one of the episodes that I wasn't sure if there was a second crash or not. And that was because I remembered having to refight a couple of battles, or at least 1 battle, earlier in the campaign. But I went back through the episodes, and it was simply that my computer had lost power, or the house, rather, had lost power, and thus my computer as well. And it happened during the middle of a battle, so I had to refight the battle. But it wasn't because the game crashed, it was because I had a power outage. So 1 crash, and it wasn't even during gameplay, so I guess you could even say 0 crashes, depending on how you want to count those. All right, and so now the last thing that I'd like to talk about very, very briefly is the future campaign. Because you see, in the past, what I've done, I start a pair of campaigns. Once one of the campaigns is finished, I then have 2 episodes of the other campaign until it is also finished. And then I would start another pair of campaigns and just repeat the process. But I'm actually not going to do that this time. Simply because I feel like we've finished so soon with this campaign compared to my Divide and Conquer campaign, which is running right now. In fact, I feel like we've gone backwards in that campaign for reasons which, if you've been watching that campaign, you'll understand why. Settlements are being taken, but settlements are also being lost or given away. And so progress is rather slow on that campaign. So we're not even close to being done with that campaign. I wouldn't even say we're halfway through. Maybe we're a quarter of the way through. Maybe. So what I decided to do instead is I'm actually going to start another campaign on a different Total War game. Obviously, Empire Total War is one that I hadn't really done on the channel before. It's all been Rome 1 or Medieval 2, or mods for those games, at least. And so, you know, we kind of went out of our comfort zone a little bit with Empire, and so now we're going to go a fair bit out of our comfort zone, and I'm actually going to do a Warhammer 3 campaign. I'm not going to go through the details really right now, because there'll be a prologue episode for that campaign, just as there is for, you know, every other campaign that I do, and that you can see the details there. But basically, I'm thinking we're so far ahead, again, or so far behind in our Divide and Conquer campaign, that I think we definitely have enough time to put another campaign in there, and definitely want to, again, go out of my comfort zone, this time perhaps quite far out of my comfort zone, because Warhammer 3 is on the other end of the list of Total War games as they came out. But at the same time, I don't have no experience with Warhammer 3, just very little. And again, we'll discuss that in the prologue episode for that campaign. But I did want to just mention it right now in this epilogue, because normally, again, this is the point where I would go, okay, there's now going to be 2 Divide and Conquer episodes until that campaign is over, but that's not going to happen. We're going to do another campaign in another Total War game to coincide with that Divide and Conquer campaign, which will continue to come out 1 episode a week. All right, but anyway, it looks like that's actually it. I really don't have anything else to say about this campaign, so thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in any of my future campaigns, or if you want to watch any of my existing campaigns, definitely feel free to do that as well. But goodbye for now, and I hope to see you soon.